have experience now dealing with very aggressive counsel during cross-examination. I know how they are attacking, and it gives me the insight of where they're going. But perhaps one of the more important things that I wanted to share with you guys is why my firm was successful, at least in my mind. I sold it 2 years or so ago. So my firm was in operation for about 18, 20 years or so. And that goes down to one of my core principles. It's called no surprises for the client. And that was really important for me because in order for my business to survive and grow to a nationwide presence that it is, literally from the Northeast down to Florida to Texas to California and Oregon, in order for that business to grow, I had to have excellent communication skills and I have to provide an avenue for feedback from my clients. I bring that up for this main reason that I want you guys to come home with. If I am elected to town council, you guys, the community, will be my client. That exact same protocol that I employed that made my business so successful, I will employ again to keep you guys informed, to provide the avenue for feedback to me for things that are bothering or concerning to you. I do not have a hidden agenda. I am here for the community. And I hope to get your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. John?
Thank you. I'm John Ross. You all have my bio, which means that you now know as much about me as my wife and possibly a bit more. So I'm not going to talk about my bio. The only thing I would like to add to it is that I'm on the sexiest committee that the town has. I'm a part of the audit committee. And for all of you all who want to know about organizations, the place to go is the audit committee, because that tells you where the money went and who spent it. And so that's what I kind of stuff I know. I want to talk about the future. To me, past decisions are like fixed cost. They're made, they're done, we're finished with them, and the point is, let's move along. And I want to bring up 3 things that I think the town could do which would make this a better place for me. I'm very much into, making a better place for me. And the 3 things are, first, the town needs to set up an economic development committee. We are just extraordinarily good at talking about what development we don't want. I mean, we've got that just nailed. What we don't know about is what development we do want. What is it that we could agree upon that we want Kiowa to look like in 10 years? We can't do this on a project-by-project basis. We can't go out and say, oh, gee, I don't like this project, and I do like that project. We need an overall plan. That plan needs to include a way to annex. We need an annex. We need a plan for annexation. We need to look at our development as a whole, not simply project by project. The second thing this committee needs to say is, once we determine what we want, how are we going to get there? What is it that we need to do to reach these goals? Right this minute, for the last couple of years, we've been run by these development agreements. Those are the things that have guided our development. They're going away. So what's going to replace them? And how are we going to agree on what's replacing them? So the first thing we need is an economic development committee. The second thing we need in the town is an office of tourism or an office of hospitality, call it whatever you like. The town spends roughly 34% of its budget attracting tourists. All of you all who have been here on a holiday weekend will agree with me that they've done a heck of a job. I mean, they're just right on top of this. The trouble is, this doesn't stop. This continues. We don't have the infrastructure in place to handle what we were getting. So this office has to balance the cost of additional tourism with the benefits. The cost, of course, is crowding. The benefits are all the people who make money out of this, and there are a lot of them. And so the issue is, how do you strike a balance? Spending our $6 million a year to bring in tourists, How do we balance that against what our island needs to look like and how we actually get around on it in the future? Third thing that the town needs to do, and this, for me, is important. Kiowa has one pot of money. The pot of money comes from the people who own property plus the businesses on the island. We have one pot of money. This one pot of money is going to buy public services. Now, we have two groups spending money for public services. We have Kika and we have the town. Between them, they spend a little over $20 million a year on public services. Trouble is that we haven't well developed or thought out, or historically we have a problem, figured out matching the resources of these groups with their public service responsibilities. The town has a reserve of roughly $40 million. $40 million on a $9 million budget means you could run the town for the next 4 years, never collecting another penny. So we're not getting enough for our money in terms of public services. On the other hand, Kika, as far as I can tell, I've just finished paying off, a $300 extra assessment, whatever that was. Kika, it appears to me, needs money. I don't think the trouble is the town collects too much or Kika collects too little. I think the trouble is we have a mismatch between the provision of public services and the resources that we have to provide them. And I think the town and Kika need to fix this mismatch. Otherwise, we can never effectively provide the public service the island needs. Those are the three things that I'm interested in. And that's what I have to say.
John, thank you very much. Dan?
Thank you, Jerry. I'm Dan Prickett, and obviously I'm responsible for some of the problems you've heard today. I sit on our town council and serve as our vice mayor, and have for the last 4 years. And it's been an honor, and I enjoy it every day, even though at times it's very frustrating. You can imagine that. What's good about our group today is we have lots of ideas about what we can do to improve the town. And there are lots of things we can do to improve the town. But remember, we're all here for one reason. We love this place. This is a terrific place to be. And the reason it is good people have worked hard for years and years to try to make good decisions to bring us to where we are today. And I don't want to lose that. This is terribly important to all of us, and it's the reason we're here. Now, can things be improved? Absolutely. And I'll give you lots of examples. But I want to work on one right now because it takes cooperation to make good improvements. Let me give you one example. We have a major problem at the front gate, right? You see it every morning and every afternoon. Getting on and off this island is tough. And it's going to get worse because we have more people coming and more development going on. How do you fix it? Well, one of the fixes is the town has commissioned, and it's all done, an engineered beach walker intersection in front of the front gate. And it's going to do a bunch of different things which will help us. For example, there'll be a right-hand turn lane because so often when you're trying to get through on the right side of the gate, if you've got a pass, you have to wait for the car that's turning right in front of you, and it's going down Beach Walker Drive. This will give 7 or 8 cars a chance to move over. There'll be a lane coming out at night that goes straight through the intersection and you won't have to stop. Guess what? There won't be an afternoon backup at the gate. That'd be terrific. If we redo that intersection, which we have the plans to do, and we have the money to pay for it, that'll help. But guess what? It doesn't solve the problem completely. What's missing? If we continue to issue passes at the front gate, you will never stop the backup problem in the morning because people get up there, come to a stop, don't know what to do. It takes 10 minutes to get them out of the way and go around the corner and come back. So the only way you can solve that problem is Kika, the developer, the town, and the resort can work together and solve it. And I'll tell you how. Somewhere along the road coming in after you pass the traffic circle, we need a turnoff that says if you don't have a pass, turn here and get off this highway. And then there can be a couple of booths that issue passes and they're off to the side. The town has the ability to actually buy some land along there to do it because we have money. Who owns the land along there? Two different people. The partners. So do we need a working relationship with them? Absolutely. Who else owns land? The Goodwin interest, the resort. We're going to have to buy some land from one of those two people. So we want to have a good relationship with them so we can have a turnoff. And then Kika can operate a gate. So they'll lease some space from the town and we can solve the problem. If we do that, which a lot of other communities like ours have done that, we can solve the front gate problem. And I only use the front gate as a little example. We need those four groups to work together positively and professionally, and we'll be fine. We'll be fine. All the issues you've heard about today are solvable, believe me. I also think we need to recognize that the biggest developer going forward is not the partners. It's the Goodwin interests. They own more land and have more opportunity on this island than anybody. We couldn't ask for a better partner. They're long-term in their thinking. They've done a great job. Look at everything they do on this island. They're terrific. We need them. I don't want them to get discouraged with the town or Kika or anybody and say, we're out of here. We don't need this anymore. We've made a lot of progress. We can make more. We've got problems, but we can do it. And I'm excited to serve one more 2-year term if you'll support me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Brad?
Thank you, Jerry. It's truly a privilege to be here with you all and with this very distinguished group of candidates. It's remarkable the extent to which you've heard common themes, and I think that is such a positive and constructive thing. And it's really signaling a change in how we think about issues around Kiawah Island. Have you ever had 8 candidates running for town council before? I think it's reflective of the fact that this community is increasingly engaged on the issues that matter to all of us. And we're thankful that you are here and that people are watching streaming. Like John, I'm not going to belabor my background. It's very nonlinear in private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector. Started out in law, then it was investment banking and private equity and private credit, and it was a little bit of government in between and some nonprofit as well. But this isn't about me. This is about us, all of us collectively. The mayor, at his opening remarks at the town council meeting 2 weeks ago, I thought offered some very thoughtful comments at the outset. He noted that we are facing collectively as a community some extraordinary challenges and changes over the next 5 years. And he started to outline many of those. And he noted that stress fractures are starting to appear. We're all familiar with those. It's, as Dan noted, the lines that are kind of that ingress and egress onto the island, up and down Bohicket and Main Drive. It's the fact that it's a struggle often. Listen, this is a high-class problem for all of us to have. We need to recognize that, but to get dinner reservations and tea times. But we are increasingly stressing our infrastructure. But think about this, put it in context. We now have about 5,000 dwelling units, residences, homes on the island. There's going to be a 20% increase in that number. There are 500, more than 500 active building permits right now, and that doesn't include potential development of Beachwalker and Lot 1. And as Dan also noted, the largest developer going forward is going to be the Goodwin family, the resort, with regard to East Beach Village, and they have a development cap, but that's 1,100 some rooms. That's how it's calculated. But that may be a 350 room hotel, as well as another 250, 300 3-bedroom villas. Plus there are a lot of lots that are still owned but are not built out yet. That's just on island. How are we going to think about and manage all that initial pressures on our infrastructure? Then the town is intricately involved in the issues off island as well. We're well aware right now of Andell West, looking at sea fields, NUSC, an expansion of the Bohicket Marina, a possible substantial medical complex across from Rosebank, build out of Kiowa River, which is allowed 1,200 home sites. And it's only 300 or 400 right now. In addition, the landowners around the area, the Goodwin Interest and the Kiowa Partners collectively own almost 1,500 acres around Freshfields Village and up Bohicket Drive. The issue for all of us is how are we going to collectively look at and plan for those challenges, to meet those challenges? I think it starts with a vision. Question is, what do we want for ourselves, for Kiowa Island and the Sea Islands community? I think Dr. Curran said half jestingly, think about Hilton Head, but that's exactly right. We should think about Hilton Head. We can't turn back the clock, nor should we. It's not going to be kind of a bucolic island of 20 and 30 years ago. But the question is, what do we want it to be going forward? Do we want it to be like Hilton Head? I certainly don't, and I suspect most people don't either. So it starts with a vision. What is it we want to be? What is it we aspire to? And then how do we get there? We have to be more proactive. We can't be reactive, passive, and wait for things to happen. The town needs to exercise leadership in engaging with all the key stakeholders. That's not just KIGR, that's not just KP, that's not just KICA. It is all of those, absolutely right, but it's also all of us. It's the community. It's in the environmental groups. It's engaging proactively with Charleston County, the Planning Commission, and the council. We need to work together to address these issues. Then the town needs to communicate and communicate and communicate. Not after the fact to try to rationalize decisions that have been made, but again, ahead of time to explain what we're going to be doing, why we're doing it, what the trade-offs are, and why we're making the decisions that we are with the involvement of the community. And that's the other thing. We have to engage. We have to engage all stakeholders in this process. We can't do a one-question survey at the tail end of the Andell West development process. KICA's actually done an extraordinarily good job of regular surveying the sentiment of its members to try to figure out what should be the priorities. The town needs to do the same kind of thing. We need to be open and transparent. We can't be making decisions repeatedly in executive session on the issues that matter to all of the community behind closed doors. It's too important to all of us. We need to understand what are those conversations about. We need to have the light of day shed on those. It's not enough to say, well, the State FOIA Act allows us to go behind closed doors into an executive session. To be very clear, it is never, ever required by the State FOIA Act. That's a decision that the town makes. We need to be open and transparent, otherwise it breeds distrust. And that's not something we can afford as a community. At the end of the day, we need to all collaborate and work in a collegial fashion with all the key stakeholders. I believe that working together and embracing openness, transparency, engagement, and communication, we can collectively meet the challenges that the mayor identified, and that we can preserve and protect what is all so very special to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Thank you all for your answers. In fairness, as we went down the line, the answers got longer and longer. And so I failed in my first job as a moderator. But the first question is going to allow some of you who may have had some additional thoughts that you didn't get to express to do that. So in fairness, I'm going to start at this and let, go down a little bit and see if you had any additional thoughts. And here's the first question. I think it plays right into what many people were talking about to begin with. What do you consider the top 3 issues facing Kiowa, and what steps would you take to make a substantial difference in these issues? So if there were some additional thoughts you wanted to opine upon, now's the time. And I know we've heard from some of you 3 thoughts already. So if we'd be respectful for the other members and let them chime in now. So Larry, why don't you start?
Okay. Thanks for the notice. 3 issues. I think the town processes do need to improve. I mentioned at the meeting, the last town hall meeting, that some of the actions are knee-jerk, unplanned, and they're not. I hate criticizing, and actually I support the mayor, but we're not proactive. The town tends to be reactive, and as the gentleman down the line said, it comes out with short notice of important resolutions. You get a day or 2 to think about it before it's actually voted on. There's the 4 a.m. concrete pour, which we've all mentioned. And there are other things that, and I don't want to take a load of time, but there are other things in terms of town process which I think can be improved. And as I say, I hate criticizing, but that's number 1. My biggest fear, I bought a home on the town of Kiowa Island. I've got a big fear that will end up being the town of Kiowa. To control that 500 acres that we talked about at Freshfields, I know there's more up the road. To control that development, we may have to annex. I prefer us to use our influence for Charleston. If we actually take 80% of 2% hospitality tax that's for the county, they take that themselves. The state only take 20%. So they rely upon us for a lot of money. We should have influence. So we should be able to influence the development of that 500 acres without annexing. Annexation, just like if 300, if the land's annexed and 300 acres are developed on, 5 BUs per acre with a vote ratio of 1.5 per house, they will outvote the town, the island. Then they could take our 25 million surplus, or the non-restricted part, which I think is 20 million, and they could build, and this is extreme, and I don't want to scare anyone, but they could actually build a tramway from Freshfields to Beachwater Park, and the beach is public. And, that's extreme, but that's dangerous if we lose control of the island. Now you're going to tell me how. So I think development of Freshfields is extremely important to the town. As I say, I joined Toki, not Top. I'll settle there because the red light's flashing.
Maura?
So I mentioned in my opening the 3 items that I want to work on, but the question of the 3 issues that are top of mind are slightly different but related. One of them is certainly the relations between the town and the community. And that is one of the issues that I want to work on. And it's not just communication, although communication is very important in that process. Something like getting a survey that says, concessions have been made. What do you think about the Andel West proposal when concessions hadn't been made? And there are a number of examples where the town's communications aren't really helpful. They're not timely. They're not accurate. I can give you one from 2 days ago. The town previously in October posted that early voting was going to take place starting on November 21st for this election at the library on Maybank. That was in their posting. It went out in their information. It sat on the website. 2 days ago, they said, it's going to take place starting November 21st, but you have to go to North Charleston. Now, these are basic things. We need to get it right. We don't need confusion, and I'm not saying that just because I'm a candidate. We just need to know what's really going on and have it accurate. I don't think that's too much to ask. So I think that the relation with the community is essential. The other thing, though, and this is me putting my lawyer hat on, the development agreements either have ended or are going to end. The resort agreement, based on the legal analysis that was described at the council meeting last week, the development agreement with the resort appears to have ended. And I brought that up with the town the day after that meeting of the council, and they said, yeah, we know, we're working on it. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means to have no development agreement with the resort, but someone needs to pay attention to that and the effects of that and what it means for all of us. And the other thing are the funds. We have unrestricted funds of almost $20 million. We have restricted funds of a little over 6 at least. But the unrestricted, what are we going to do with that? And that is, some of it should probably be put away for rainy day for our causeway, for the repair of that or the replacement if we need to. But what are we going to do with that? And are we going to invest it in a way that's not in the state investment pool where our interest last year was only $60,000? We're investing millions, tens of millions of dollars, and our interest was 60 million. And our investment policy allows us to invest it in other places. As stewards, the council and the town mayor have to do a little better with all of our funds.
Thank you, Maura. Michael?
Yes, I think there are 3 things that are most important. First, how we handle development on this island. Second, how do we professionalize certain areas in the town to help us to better understand what's going on and help us to make better decisions? And third, we have to collaborate. We cannot continue yelling at each other and not sitting around a table and negotiate. Now, let me explain this a little bit. So the development part is very important to understand that the landowners have rights. And we cannot just sit here like some and say we have to stop all of this. This is not possible. We need to be realistic. What we can do, though, as a town and also in collaboration with Kika, we can sit down and talk and negotiate and make sure that those that are invested in our island understand also what they have to lose. They have to lose image, reputation. They have to lose, and some believe they already lost, trust of the community. We need to make sure that we govern the development of our island in a way that we can all be proud of, as many of us have been proud for the right reasons of what this island has become over the years. We cannot sit there. We need to negotiate. We need to find common ground and not just allow developers to put their finger on development agreements and zoning rights. They have to understand that the community has a right and that we have certain opinions we want to negotiate. Communication. I think it is not only a question of professionalism to make sure that whatever communication goes out from the town, as Maura pointed out, is to the point. I think it has also something to do with how our representatives, your representatives, are approachable, and you can talk to them. The fact that we are sitting here behind a table is, a contradiction by itself for me, at least, because in business, we would have certainly found a different way of communicating with our stakeholders. But we need to be approachable. We need to be able to listen to the community, understand their concerns, and build it into the decisions that we have to make in the years to come. And we can only do this, my third point, we can only do this, as also Dan, I believe, mentioned that, we can only do this in a civil, harmonious way of sitting down and talk and collaborate. We cannot continue to have a situation where stakeholders on this island are not willing to sit down with us as a community because they know they get yelled at. This can't continue like this. We can only bring this island to a stage of beauty that we all want, and only together we can avoid that this becomes a second Hilton Head. Those are the 3 points for my objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kerner?
Yes, so I'm going to echo the development is obviously one of the priorities. I also believe that, approach of negotiating and working collaboratively with the stakeholders is key, and to have a specific plan of what we want the future development of the island and the properties off the island to be. But clearly, the future development is a priority for all of us. I guess I think traffic and infrastructure is a second priority, because there is going to be development. We're not going to stop the development from occurring. Hopefully, we can fashion the development so that it's acceptable to all the stakeholders, but there is going to be future development. And we're going to need the infrastructure to handle that, traffic being a obvious concern. Some of this goes to communication, and we're talking about transparency and communicating. Communication is a two-way process. There's a certain problem, and there was recently a meeting at the town hall about the traffic, about Bohicket, and there were very few Kiowa residents there. I mean, there was probably 120 people there, and maybe half of them at the most were from Kiowa. The rest were from people on Johns Island. So for there to be this great communication, it's a two-way process. We have to engage the community to become more active, because if we put out a survey, obviously we need all the people to express their opinions. So, and we can talk about the survey that was sent out, and obviously that was probably not the best question. Lastly, having more of a science background, I think one of the things that has been eye-opening, we used to go to Sanibel in Florida, and that was just destroyed. And I think we need to focus a little bit more on climate change and prepare our island for future storms. I mean, there's no question that the storms are increasing yearly. The storms are becoming more intense. We've had a near miss this year. I think we need to do everything we can. I mean, we can talk about development and things like that. That's obviously important, but we also need to prepare ourselves and our island for future storms. And I think that money that thankfully we do have, I think that should be a big focus of some of those funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, sir. So, great question. I'm really excited about answering this one. With respect to the first answer that I have, look at what I have done and listen to what I'm about to tell you. Remember when I started off with my introduction, I said I'm a trustee of the Conservancy. That's why it's the first response I have to that question. The Conservancy is a big deal to me. The preservation of the land is a big deal to me, not just for the land, but for the wildlife. That is very, very important to me. If you go back to information I sent out 2, 3, 4 weeks or so ago, I mentioned in that information that I wanted to work with landowners and other developers up and down Betsy Carrison. Why? Is because I want to make sure people outside of the purview of the town of Kiowa are going to hopefully work with us to make an image up and down Betsy Carrison that matches and mirrors what we have. But not just there. Let's work with the landowners to see how great would it be if instead of developing, they put it in the Conservancy. How great would that be? And what I keep hearing over and over and over again, what people keep saying, they want to keep Kiowa the way it is. Well, that goes a long way to keeping Kiowa the way it is. So let's reach out. One thing I also haven't heard today was I heard that working with the town, with Kika and the resort. I didn't hear working with the Conservancy. I want to work with the Conservancy. We can help preserve the environment by working with the Conservancy. Another thing I want to say with respect to the development agreement, there's a lot of debate Whether the existing development agreement is terminated or not, to be honest, of course, I don't know, because I do know that the town has retained outside counsel and they have an opinion. One of the first things, the first thing I want to do if I get elected, I want to meet with the town council and I want to get a firm understanding, do we have an effective development agreement or not? And I need to understand why, because right now there's a lot of guessing. It's valid, it's not guessing. I need to find out for myself. The last thing is with respect to communication I mentioned earlier. No surprises for the client. You guys are my client. I will communicate with you and I will provide an avenue for you to give feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. John?
Let's start. All economic development is a negotiation. It just is. That's a fact. We all go in and negotiate. The stronger side we have, the better position we are in to do the negotiation. The first step in this thing is you have to know what you want. And that's why I was suggesting an economic development committee, because we need some process to figure out what we want the front gate to look like, what we want the roads coming in to look like. I mean, I have my ideas. I like the birds, okay? I just as soon we left it as a bird sanctuary. I don't think that would be a winning suggestion. So we need some way or other to develop a notion about what we want to go into any sort of negotiation with the developer. We also need to plan about how we're going to get there. And this depends upon the tools that we have to go in. In the past life, I negotiated, $70 billion worth of economic development contracts, a whole bunch of them. And the stronger position you go in with, the better the outcome is you're going to get when you come out. So the question is, what is the process that we set up to determine what we want in these negotiations, and how do we go about getting it? The other thing is, I agree that we need to do something about flooding and hurricanes and climate change. This is a big deal. We live on an island. Those of us who have been through hurricanes here know getting in the car and driving to wherever we have to drive to is no fun at all. We're not going to stop the hurricanes, but we can do something about the infrastructure to help protect the island as we go.
Thank you, John. Dan?
Well, there's a lot of commonality as I listen to everybody's concerns and therefore their priorities, and I would agree with a lot of them. My first priority, and it has been for several years now, is roads and infrastructure. We have today two lane highways that lead from here to Maybank Highway, which is another 2-lane highway with no room for growth. So we have 3 roads that we all depend on. And in a normal day, you can navigate them, except if you leave at 7 in the morning and are trying to get here, or you're leaving at 5 at night and you're trying to get there because you can't navigate it then, right? And we have no other options right now. If we have a crisis and we all need to leave, we won't get out of here. We don't have the infrastructure to get out of here. What's happening on the north end of Main Road now? All that nice farmland that we pass by every day, what's happening? There are thousands of houses going up, and they're already approved and they're being built as we speak. The road now between where River Road intersections Maybank Highway and crossing the bridge, what's going on both sides of the highway? The trees are going down left and right, and thousands of apartments are going in. We won't be able to get to town anymore. We have a serious infrastructure problem. The county is barely listening to us. Barely. What we heard 2 weeks ago when Jenny Honeycutt was able to get the county to come back out and talk to us about it, they said, well, we took a vote, and of the 7 or so alternatives, 4 groups liked 4 of them equally. And so now we're going to have to study it. We've already lost 2 years because of COVID in that structure. We're going to lose another couple more if they don't get the engineers involved, and let's come up with a solution and get something done. So we've got to push the county. We got to figure out better ways to push the county to help us with infrastructure, and it's going to get worse. Flooding is part of the infrastructure, and Kika's done a good job in beginning to mitigate some of the flooding on the roads on the island, which is helpful, but we've got more to do there. The second big thing, which we've talked about as well, in my opinion, is our climate and sea level rise. We face a crisis, and it used to be, well, it's going to be out 20 years and 30 years and I'll be dead or I'll be retired by then. I won't worry about it. It's coming a lot faster. And if you own land on the back of the island toward the marshes, you're beginning to see some erosion. And we have studies about it. We're doing a good job and working on it, but we've got to increase the pressure and spend some of the money we've got on that problem. And it is serious and right now. The final one, which we're all worried about, is late stage development. That's where we are. It's a lot easier to build this island out when nobody's here. I'll put in a road and everybody will be happy. But we're at the late stage. It's managing what we've got now. As has been pointed out, there is still a lot of development that's already been approved on this island, and we're struggling with what's already here. The town doesn't need to get bigger. We shouldn't be acquiring new land and new houses out there. We've got to worry about what we've already taken under our belt and do a better job. And yes, we need to better communicate, and I want to talk about communication. In my opinion, IKEA is killing us. It's making us polarized. It's full of misinformation, and people have stopped listening and just started talking. That's a problem for us. And as a town and as a community, we need to think about that. We've got to find better ways to communicate with each other, and it's our responsibility as a town, it's our responsibility as a citizens. But things like IKEA and the polarization it creates is a serious problem that we need to address as a community.
Thank you, Dan. Brad?
Good governance, responsible development, environmental stewardship. I want to touch upon a couple of things that have been mentioned. I outlined a number of issues that I think are critical for the town in Toki and the council to address going forward, to be a better governing organization, a better leadership organization for the community. But one thing we have to acknowledge is we've woven a very tangled web here on Kiowa Island. We've got an extraordinarily complex governance structure, and it's not just between Kika and Toki. The interplay between the development agreements, the general covenants, the Kika covenants, the bylaws, the rules and regulations, the terms of access onto the island are extraordinarily complex and muddled. And it's going to take a lot to work through that. I know Kika has a governance council. They've been struggling with this issue, but they're not easily resolved. But it does require everybody to come together, and particularly on issues like island access, which involves all the stakeholders, because Kika nominally controls access to the island. But the issue is KIGR and all of us as homeowners and the resort are entitled to have guests to have access. And so it's not just who's coming onto the island right now, but think about that 1,500 acres that's going to be developed ultimately by the Goodwin family and the Kiowa partners. Are all of those interests, all the homeowners and residents in those properties going to have access to the island? How do we solve for that? Responsible development, I agree completely with Michael that we need to respect property rights. I certainly do. The issue is when a developer wants something more than the property rights that they're entitled to. If they want an amendment to the development agreement, if they want rezoning, if they want a variance, that provides the opportunity, but also the obligation to have a negotiation about a give and take, compromise, quid pro quo. Finally, just briefly, environmental stewardship. I missed it, but there was a great program that Madeline hosted today focused on marsh management. We need to also be more, resiliency is a major issue, but we also need to be more respectful of our maritime forest and our native wildlife. We've been making decisions and taking actions that have threatened our wildlife habitat. When Kiowa Conservancy says development of beach walker parcels threatens the local bobcat population, we should be taking that into serious consideration and figuring out how not to allow that to happen.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you all. Okay, we're running behind. That always is usually the case in these sorts of things, but I think that people are here, committed and interested. So all I would ask is that you, in this next round, that we try as best we can to watch the clock. Here's a question that and I'm also going to do hopscotch now, so we don't go down the line and we have, give people, they don't have to wait forever to answer the question. Are there any restrictions in place today relative to residential rentals, allowed vehicle types, commercial and retail businesses that you would propose changing in the future, and how? Dr. Kern?
Could you read it again, please?
Sure. Are there any restrictions in place today relative to residential rentals, allowed vehicle types, commercial or retail businesses that you would propose changing in the future, and how?
Residential rentals, I think there are restrictions, short-term rentals versus long-term. I think that they, again, from what I'm familiar with, there's only so many rentals at certain areas of the island as well. So I guess I don't really have any specific plan of changing the rental agreements. As far as vehicles, I know there's restrictions on certain vehicles as well. I think you I've heard that they don't like these larger vans. Again, I'm not familiar with all the specifics as far as vehicles restrictions. I don't really see that as a major. I think most of the traffic is either residents, tourists, or construction. Obviously the large construction trucks, and we can't restrict those. They're coming on the island to do business. So I don't think I have any specific as far as restrictions on vehicles. I'm not also not worried about electric bikes. I know there are some people that don't like electric bikes. I don't see. I personally don't see that that's a big issue. And then the last part of it was commercial. I think that, there are certain areas of the beach walker that are potentially zoned for commercial. Again, I'm not in favor of that. I like the way our commercial development is with, sort of the fresh fields area. Obviously, there's discussion about Andel West. But I hope that there's no commercial development along Beach Walker, even though there is zoning for that.
All right, thank you very much, Doctor. Maura,
Okay, I think I got this written down.
do you want me to repeat the question
That
for
would,
you all?
that would be a kindness, thank you.
Okay, I will kindly do that. And,
Does it count during the time, though?
okay. I'll try to get it within the time. Are there any restrictions in place today relative to residential rentals, allowed vehicle types, commercial or retail businesses that you would propose changing in the future, and how? And I'll be glad to repeat it for each of you if you feel it's necessary.
Okay.
It is a long rambling question.
All right, so let me start with restrictions that currently exist on residential or rentals. The short-term rental ordinance for the town is, has the following limitation. If you have, for example, a 4-bedroom home, if you have a permit or business license, you can rent your home, and you can rent to up to 10 people for a 4-bedroom home. That is supposed to therefore limit the number of cars that can be parked. The issue is always enforcement. And we have code enforcers, but it's very difficult to figure out in a rental. First, you have to know enough about the rental property to know how many bedrooms are there. Then you have to have an idea that they are exceeding it wildly. But I do think that one of the things to look at is maybe changing the short-term rental ordinance. And bringing it down to not eliminating the +2. I think that is something that I want to look at. One of the ways right now, I think that the town might be able to collaborate with Kika is Kika knows how many cars are coming in and they know what properties they're going to. And I think that would aid the enforcement element that the town is required to do, because Kika does not have the enforcement over that element. So I think in the meantime, enforcement can be upped by cooperating more with Kika. But I do think we should look at eliminating the +2. On restrictions on different vehicles,
types.
I don't know of the town having any ordinances, and I've spent a lot of time looking at the 169 pages of ordinances. I don't know that they have any ordinances that address the types of vehicles that drive on the road. Remember, the road that the town is responsible for is about 3 miles long. It is from the rotary to the first gate. So Kika does have limitations. No mobile homes, no motorcycles. So as a Kika member and a resident on the island, I think those are good, but I don't think the town actually goes into that topic. And I'm not sure they need to, so long as it seems to be working in the Kika system. On pedal assist or e-bikes, all I would say is Kika has a rule right now that they're not allowed. And I would never want the town and Kika on that issue to take a contrary position. They can collaborate on what the position was going to be.
Thank you, Maura. Dan?
Yeah, my understanding is that and I've talked to the people responsible for this, the short-term rental program is working pretty well. We have a number of communities who have faced some of the same issues we have and have come to the town saying, how are you doing this? It's working pretty well here. Part of it is enforcement, and the fact that we have added enforcement officers who work in the evening when the violations often occur is helping a lot. They also have a pretty good database. So when they're out, they know which ones are rentals. They know how many bedrooms are approved. And remember, we send an inspector in who looks at, there were people who called, a closet a bedroom, and we said that's not a bedroom. So it's been sorted out what is actually a bedroom. So when an inspector goes out, he knows if it's a rental, or he or she knows if it's a rental. They know how many bedrooms they're supposed to have. They can count the number of cars, and they take a photo. If there's a violation, they take a photo of it, and you can see the violation. It's working pretty well, and what's happening is not only the rental agencies, but the homeowners who are co-responsible for a violation, they now understand it's being managed. And guess what? They're beginning to manage it. It's working pretty well. Violations are going down. Things have gotten quiet. So there's not a lot I would change. I hear you more on the +2. That's a question in my mind as well. Is that really necessary? If you've got 4 bedrooms, I'd say have 8 people and have 4 cars. That's fine. That would be one change I'd make. The town, you're right. We have public roads. We cannot restrict other than by weight how much goes over a bridge. So the restrictions like for electric bikes and so on is really a Kika responsibility, not the town's.
Dan, thank you very, very much. Larry?
Okay, I'll answer this question from both a Kika and a town of Key West viewpoint, as it really is a shared issue. I mean, the town doesn't have much control over what happens on the island. In terms of speed limits, it does, but in terms of what goes on, it doesn't. So the issues I'd address are e-bikes. I have a strong feeling about e-bikes. I cycle. The argument's been made that they can be regulated, but the regulation chips can be distorted, and the restriction can be eliminated. I read a Dutch study on e-bikes and injuries by a Dutch university. They cycle a lot over in Holland, and it said that e-bikes are fine as long as you have a defined path with high visibility and not many stops. If you have a lot of stops and poor visibility, the accident rate goes up. We do not have good visibility on the trails on the island. As an aside, it did say another factor was actually age, because the older you are, the more risk you are of accidents, because e-bikes are heavier than normal, ordinary bikes, so to speak. So the accident rate does go up with older people. So I'm actually against e-bikes, not just for the rider, but for other people using the trail. I think everything else is fine. I would say some of the rules, like there's a rule about overnight parking on the island. How do you define overnight? I specify, there's a lot of rules and regulations on the island which I think need clarification, and to be more specifically written down. And then finally, it's just a minor irritant. Oh, let's just make the point. Remember all the fuss about the short-term rentals that we had years ago? A lot of angst, a lot of argument. The cap is 20%. The level today is 14%. We have got no problem with the short-term rental situation. Then finally, one irritant I have, and again, it's probably a Kika issue, is the number of cyclists that seem to come from Freshfields. I've seen them. They cycle down the path, and these aren't your normal cyclists. These are guys with, the sort of latex gear on. They're going at high speeds. They come onto the island and they cycle around. They cycle on our roads, and there's a potential accident. So I do something about that as well. Thank you.
Brad?
Might approach it a slightly different way, Jerry, and it kind of goes back to this tangled web we've woven in terms of governance structure. Again, we're extraordinarily unique. Every single resident on the island, every single resident of town of Kiowa Island is a resident on Kiowa Island and a member of the Homeowners Association, KICA. Now, you can have a town of Kiowa Island short-term rental ordinance, and that kind of sets the maximum of what is permissible, 20% short-term rental cap. But interestingly enough, KICA could impose a much more restrictive rental cap if it wanted to do so, because private parties can always restrict themselves. You can't be more permissive than the municipality, but you can always be more restrictive. Taken down another level, there's a whole bunch of homeowners associations around the island. They can be more restrictive yet, or they can have their own set of policies. For example, Riverview, ours, and this is true of other HOAs, restricted short-term rentals. Right now, starting in a month, it's only minimum 90 days. Starting in 2 years, it's going to be a minimum of 9 months. We passed covenants where we collectively agreed to do that. So it kind of creates this interesting dynamic that exists between the town and the homeowners association and KICA and the sub-associations about how best to manage these issues and how best to enforce them. And I'm not directly answering the question, but to again drive home the point that we need to figure out collectively how we really want to be governed. And it's not just an issue of Toki. Toki is more important, in my view, external to the island. Everything that's else going on external to the island. KICA is what really matters most with regard to day-to-day life on the island.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, short-term rental, I don't think it's a major problem. I just looked into this yesterday. I actually believe it's 15% if KICA's website is correct. And we don't fully utilize this. It's a first come, first serves list that you have to apply and need to be approved of if you rent less than 30 days. I think the problem lies with the enforcement, especially if there are noise issues that come from renters and neighbors feel threatened by it. That has shown to be rather difficult. When I was on the noise ordinance work group, it was really difficult to come up with some rules, although we did, but in a way that it can be fair and measurable. I think that's the main issue, although the number of complaints is extremely low. So I don't think that's a major issue, but the enforcement is a topic that we need to look at. The ordinance itself, I think, is pretty clear and straightforward. As it comes to allowed vehicles, and here we again cross the line between town and Kika, etc. There are clear restrictions for motorcycles, three-wheelers, electric bikes, etc. on the island, and I think everybody who has heard the Harley Davidson from the police force coming on the island for the last PGA Tour understands why that's a good thing. And also, of course, these ATVs, etc., are not allowed. So there are clear rules for the island that I believe don't need a change. When it comes to commercial retail outlets, etc., the ordinances also are very clear. That although there are certain parcels correctly along Beachwalker Drive that also allow certain commercial use, but mostly offices, or I believe even exclusively offices. But otherwise, there's no way that we would have, fast food places on the island with drive-throughs or tattoo parlors. Although those are, of course, concerns that relate to the Endel West development, where we need to be very cautious. And I think one of the reasons why Endel West was, rejected so many times is because we still are not satisfied with what is allowed on that property. We want to have the same plant development restrictions as it is for the current fresh fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. John?
Short-term rental, my only idea here is that we should review the policy every so many years such that we keep it in front of us and we understand what's going on. So we should set it up as a 5-year policy and then review it. Electric bikes, where I'm from, electric bikes are the escape vehicle of choice for those under 16 after a mugging. So it's not something that I'm interested in having on the island. I've seen lots of it. I assume that wouldn't happen here. But actually, on the beach, where I do lots of walking with my dog, they scare me. So I'm happy with not having them here. My only concern gets back to the problem with groups. It's hard to know who enforces which rule. And I've only been here for 6 years as a full-time resident, and I have trouble figuring it out. For example, parking. Overnight parking, there are restrictions if you're a rental. If you have a problem, you call the town. On the other hand, there are certain roads that you are not allowed to park on. I live off Eugenia. That's one of those roads. You can't park there overnight. Well, if you park there, you don't call the town. You call Kika. And so you're always in the position of, who should I call? Suppose I have a problem. Now, who is it that I'm going to call up to solve that problem for me? And I agree. We need to simplify our governing structures.
Thank you. Russell?
Well, this is a very interesting one for me. A lot of people have said my thoughts already, but there's a couple of notes that I wrote down here. With respect to the residential rental program, I do see that enforcement is a problem because there are too many times I walk down the street and you can say that's a rental. You should not be able to identify a rental when you're walking down the street. One of the thoughts I had was that we should periodically, annually or biannually, survey the community with respect to this question, with respect to the short-term rentals. Ask them, what they see as a concern. And I bring that up is because I just know the rental program that is near where I live. I'm not aware of any problems that are elsewhere in the island, and the survey information could be very helpful. I want to see a limitation to the number of cars, however, that'll be allowed to stay within the property. I do agree it should be just one car per bedroom, and that will be the limit. We should continue the enforcement. Actually, not continue. We should enforce no bikes on the roads, because there are too many times I've seen these cyclists on the roads, not on the bike path, which is just dangerous, not just for the bicyclists, but also for the people trying to turn around them. I agree with no motorcycles. I agree with no golf carts. I had a wild idea that, again, I'm coming from the conservancy background. I would love to see the beach patrol go electric. Why not? They don't have to have gas-powered cars running all day long. Make them electric. One thing we haven't heard yet is signage. We've all been aggravated when we're coming into the property that there are people in the wrong lane coming on the island. I believe we need more signage, and that would be within the town's purview. One last thing I do have is with respect to an emergency. My wife and I had an interesting situation about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We had people parking in our driveway. And we called the main gate, and it took them 35 minutes to come to our house. And Karen and I, we got on their case, and I said, what if this is a robber? What if this was a muggy? 35 minutes, and they said they were busy setting up for the marathon. So there's a problem that has to be addressed with respect to response time, particularly with notice to dangerous situations. And I think we should have a protocol in the community. Do you call 911? Do you call the main gate? What is the protocol? Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Okay, here's the next question. Do you support engaging a law firm to perform a legal audit with respect to the development agreement with the partners, the development agreement with the resort, and to confirm that the annexation of Freshfields Village was appropriately done? Michael?
Thank you. I think when it comes to, I think the first part of the question as it relates to the development agreement, I do understand that there are a lot of different opinions flying around, but I also want to remind everybody that the town actually has contracted an independent law firm to look at the matter and provide a recommendation, which I believe they followed. Now, one can be in disagreement how this has all been communicated to the community and how decisions have been made, and certain comments during that decision process have been made, and also how commentary from the community have been neglected during the process in the town council. But I think we need to, at some point, trust our elective volunteers on the town council, or might it also be Kika, that when they do contract lawyers, and especially in that case, there were 2 different lawyers involved in that, I think we have to trust them that they're doing the right thing. We can certainly open this up again and looking at this again with a third law firm. I'm not sure that this would really help. As it relates to Andal West, or let's say, I think the second question was about the other development agreements. Of course, the town would be very well advised to, again, look at different opinions, different legal opinions before we are renewing the development agreement, for example, with the golf resort in a few years, because we want to make sure that we have an independent opinion legal-wise, because I'm not always sure that we can really trust the legal counsel that we actually are employing at the moment, based on my own experience that I had in various cases on the planning commission. But I think that should be kind of a regular professional behavior from the town. Andal West is at the moment outside of the jurisdiction of the town. If it comes to an annexation attempt again, which might actually be in the interest of the community if done right, then of course also there should be a proper professional legal advice that we should receive, and better to have 2 of them than just 1. Thank you.
Brad?
Both Kika and the town have already retained counsel, outside counsel through issues with regard to the development agreement. And I expect those reviews will continue. What town council indicated, based on, and he said it's supported by the outside counsel retained, is that they were doing a deep dive over the last few months. Question whether they should have been doing a deep dive much beyond the community raising issues with regard to the development agreement, but at least they're going through that process. I have somewhat contrary view on what transpired 2 weeks ago to some folks. It was Dan's and the mayor's and his fellow council members' prerogative, in my view, to take the action that they did. And if they had a good faith belief that was the best resolution to an issue that had been identified, I'm fully supportive of their taking that action. I think the question that arises is, while that conclusion may be that it was kind of the best resolution from the town's standpoint, kind of the town as an institution, to deal with development agreement issues vis-a-vis the partners. The question is still unanswered, and you do have different views on this, as to whether the agreement actually expired back in 2015, because all the rationale that the town council articulated for taking the action that was taken to allow the agreement to go from 2013 to 2023 arguably pertains to whether the 2005 agreement expired in 2015. That's not a benign issue, because if it did, that has profound implications for the development that could occur with respect to Beachwalker parcels, Lot 1. It raises issues with regard to whether the Cape and Timbers developments were properly developed. The issue is there are still people that are affected by those developments. And so there may need to be a declaratory action. It may need to a court resolve those issues to protect the collective interest. I can't just simply be competing views of lawyers, and I see the flashing light, Jerry.
Maura?
So you handed from one lawyer to the next lawyer, but we don't want competing views of lawyers. So the question on the legal audit for both the partners development agreement and the resort development agreement, I think it's necessary, and let me explain why. I was at the meeting 2 weeks ago when Joe Wilson explained what the legal analysis was, what the conclusions were. And they were not as complete as I would have liked, is maybe the way to say it. And let me explain. The development agreement with the partners was signed in 2013, and they had then extended it to 2026. And everyone thought that was the length of time the development agreement with the partners would last. Then comes this Fourth Amendment proposed to council to shorten the time, which caused everyone a little bit of consternation, shorten it to December of next year. So the question was, what's going on? Mr. Wilson described a revelation. We don't know when it occurred, but a revelation sometime recently that the 2013 agreement was probably not in effect. And so they needed to correct that. And so they proposed corrective language to the document. The problem with corrective language is they only correct 3 places where it's referred to as an amended agreement or where other terms are changed. It's still called an amended and restated agreement, which means it relates to the earlier agreement. I know this is all like legal geekdom, but it matters. It matters whether the document really could be changed the way they changed it. And I'm not confident it was. But as Brad says, the issue is if it's now legal based on what they did at council, what happens to everything they did before that date, going back to 2015? Because if permits and development was undertaken under an agreement that didn't exist, I have no idea what the legal consequences are, except it's very frightening to me. And I'd like some legal help. I am not a South Carolina lawyer. I can spot the issue. I can be scared of the issue. I think legal counsel is needed. And the resorts development agreement has apparently ended in 2020. So again, we need that. On the Freshfields issue, the annexation question that's being asked is not Ando, it's Freshfields. The question is, when Freshfields was annexed so long ago, was it actually contingent or next to any property owned by the town? And that has been a question that's been percolating in the community for a long time. The annexation was done. The question is, what was it adjacent to that was owned by the town that permitted the town to do it? So I think that does need to be looked into.
Thank you, Maura. John?
This is a lawyer's question, not my kind of an issue. Hang on. What I think is this is why you elect people to council, to answer this kind of a question. I think that they do the best job they can, and if they think we need other lawyers, then hire them. From outside of their discussions, I don't have enough information to really have a position on this. The other thing that I think is whenever you start asking these kind of questions, you've got to first ask, what are you going to do with the answer? I mean, suppose we ask the question, and suppose the lawyers say, oh my God, everything you've done for the past 15 years is not legal. We're going to go tear it down? I mean, the issue often is, if you're going to ask these kinds of questions, you have to have something you're going to do with the answer, or otherwise you're going to simply support the next vote for your lawyer friend who is defending you in court. So that, again, this isn't really my sort of question, but that's kind of what I think about it.
Dan?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, thank God. However, the lawyer that was brought in for a second opinion, whose name is Ross Appel, is reported to be one of the most distinguished lawyers in South Carolina on the issues of land use, zoning, and development agreements. The town hired what we thought would be the best attorney to look at this, and he did. And like our attorney, Joe Wilson, they said, based on everything we've discovered, the best solution to be, as Brad just pointed out, would be to terminate this at the end of 10 years. Now, can you restudy this? Yeah. Was it a good opinion by a reputable counsel? Absolutely. And I don't think, none of the three of us who are serving on council right now are lawyers. So we took our lawyer's advice and made a good, reasoned judgment to solve it, because to continue when you know it's supposed to expire at the end of 10 years would be a failure on our part. So that didn't make sense to us. I'm pretty comfortable with that. Should we look at some more things? Yeah, maybe. But the good point is, well, what are you going to do with it if you learn more? You're not going to go down and tear down some buildings and so on. I don't know what the implications are, but council received, or the town council received, good advice from attorneys who know this business far better than we did, made a good business decision, and moved on. Next stage, we'll see.
Thank you, Dan. Russell?
Yes, sir. So I also am not a lawyer. I'm a professional engineer, and I own my own engineering consulting firm. And this comes down to best business practices. Remember, and I said in my introduction, I spent a lot of time resolving disputes. Many times I get involved in contractual disputes, whether the contractor did something right or wrong, whether the developer did something right or wrong. Unfortunately, sometimes it gets gray. Enter the outside counsel. Now, I would meet with outside counsel and understand where their opinion is coming from, and as required, challenge it. And I learned from doing all this litigation work as an engineer expert witness is that, particularly with respect to bench trials, that the adjudicator relies a lot on case law. I cannot figure out what the case law is. That's not in my area of specialty. I, just like what the town did, would hire outside counsel and rely on what those experts are telling me. And that's what the town did, as best as I see from reading the documents and attending the meetings. But that's what they did, and I think they did it correctly. You have to rely on the expertise of somebody else, particularly in the law field, in order to make a decision. That's what I would do in the future, and that's exactly what the town did here. With respect to the annexation of Freshfields, I can't opine on that one at all, because I do not know any of the data. That's just out of my wheelhouse. Same thing though. That question was whether or not the annexation was correct or not. I have to rely on the expertise of the outside counsel. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. We are.
Jerry, I have another chance.
Oh, I'm sorry, Larry. Yes.
I didn't answer either.
So for clarification, my understanding is the partners' development agreement It's been agreed between them and the town that ends next year. There's 297 units still to be built under that agreement. 94 is at the town, the rest is lot 1 at Beach Walker. You can't go and change the past, but the Beach Walker development is still not being completed. The height and the density of the development units on those sites was changed subsequent to 2015 or 2013, I forget which one. And it would be nice if we could negotiate some of those back away, because there are really, really tall buildings going in there. And I went round to the Cape and looked at the scale of those buildings at the Cape. And I don't want 4-story huge buildings at the entrance to the Cape. So we can't go to the past, but I would like the density and the height to be changed. For the resorts, their development agreement was to expire in 2027. Now there's some doubts. The resort's a lot more critical. There are 60 acres of land still to be developed. Some, believe it or not, it is possible. They may not do so, but some is actually at Mingo Point. Some is where that brush is next to the sanctuary on the beach. So it's very, very critical, very prime land. And I think they'll be more of a partner with us. The resort, they've got skin in the game. But I think it is important for that development agreement to be looked at by lawyers. I'm not in favor of using lawyers too much, but we're up against. We're working with developers who are very smart, and there's a lot of money at stake. And the town board is basically volunteers. So in this case, I would advocate using lawyers. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, and I apologize for skipping ahead there. Dr. Kern?
Yeah, so I'll be brief. From my read of all the facts, it appears that the town council did appropriate. They sought out legal consultation regarding the development agreement. Obviously, they came to an agreement with the partners on an expiration date of December 2023. As far as some of these other questions about whether it really expired in 2015, obviously you have to depend on your outside legal consultation. So I support the town council's actions and their vote to the agreement ending in December 2023. Similarly, I would say the town council needs to obviously have legal consultation for their development agreement with the resort. And, you have to depend on your legal experts as far as some of these contractual agreements. So I support what they did, and I would encourage them to continue to do that when it comes to these development agreements, to seek outside legal counsel.
Thank you, John. Okay, we have time for one more question and then your final remarks. So here's the last question for all of you. The last audited financial statement ending in June 30th, 2022, the town shows for restricted funds $5,349,279 and unrestricted funds in the amount of $19,937,186, or close to $20 million. What would you propose that the town do with this large amount of unrestricted funds? And I'll start with Russell.
So with respect to the unrestricted funds, and just by going to and from Freshfields Village, I noticed that the bike path is in disrepair in many places, and I find the bike path a little scary in places without a nice restrictive barrier device. Funds should be expended to repair the bike path, because that is actually within the town's right-of-way. It's not just the road, but it's also the bike path. And I would like to see something like the cable stay system installed that you see on roadways and highways. And I select that intentionally because it would be something with minimal visibility, but it would protect people who are on the side of the road and the bike path from oncoming traffic. I'd also like to see them, as I mentioned before, do a better job with the signage coming in. There definitely is room for improvement. I think they should also spend more money with respect to the intersection coming in. A better resolution. There's a temporary resolution that is being worked on right now. I'm on that engineering committee. But we heard earlier today that there's going to be a full exit speed from the island, but that's just a temporary solution because, as we all heard today, additional traffic is going to be coming on the island. We need to do a relocation of the pass office to outside of it, and if the town has to submit monies for doing that, I think that is one of the best things that the town could do for its money to help us get in and out of the island. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Russell. Larry?
Okay, this question was asked at the 2000 Meet the Candidates sessions. The response then from one of the mayoral candidates was, well, we've estimated the cost, or we've done a study that the cost of a Cat 5 hurricane to hit this island would actually cost the town, which it doesn't have that much responsibilities in terms of acreage, would cost the town 20 million. So that was the reason why we needed this sort of money. I think people forget FEMA. When the last hurricane hit, I think the cost was 700,000. I think FEMA, the government reimbursed virtually all of that. So maybe we need a contingency for a hurricane, and that's justifiable, but it's not the 20 million that we've got currently. First off, I'd ask people, I've got some views, but I'd ask people what should we do with the money, or at least I'd ask and listen to people. Some of my thoughts are, the town's responsible for the beach, and the beach really doesn't have a lot of disabled facilities. It has one public restroom for the whole 10 miles sort of thing. I'd examine whether or not we can do more for disabled people on the island and restrooms. Everybody complains about the phone connection and the internet connection. Could we do something in conjunction with the providers to improve that? But again, I'd ask the town, I'd ask the people. That's really it.
Thank you very much. Michael?
Yes. I think it's of course, rather unusual situation that a town has so much money in the bank. I think most towns around us are, in dire need for loans to keep their business going. So we should be proud of this. But I think, first of all, there are a lot of projects that were also mentioned that can easily be funded within the yearly budget of the town. So we don't need to necessarily go to the unrestricted funds. But I think I was at that Our World presentation earlier this afternoon with a lot of people in the room, some of you also here tonight. And again, we got quite a bit of a scare of what will happen to this island over the coming decades with sea level rising. For whatever reason, that was not the topic of the evening. But I think we need to be very smart in how we are using this money, not only for being capable of dealing with a highly destructive storm that would hit the island, and I think we all know this will happen at some point, but also use some of the funds to actually help us protect the island. And I think what the town has, with great forward-looking and strategic actions put in place in terms of the marsh management plan, is going to be a great basis for us to protect this island going forward. But I would also think that for some of the measures that are most likely coming out of the plan in terms of what will really be implemented, that we also need the support from the town. We need incentives probably for some homeowners to replace, for example, some of the concrete driveways with more ecologically acceptable ways. We need to encourage homeowners or property owners to put more expensive but ecologically more acceptable ways in place to stop erosion. So I think some of this 20 million unrestricted fund should be used for those purposes, aside from just being prepared for the storm that will hit us at some point. Thank you, Chair.
Michael. Dan?
That's a good question. It does appear that we have all of a sudden lots of money. Let's talk about why. COVID is the major reason we've had a surplus for the last couple of years. And let me give you some specific numbers. This year, expenses, revenues exceeded expenses by $6.1 million. This year being the fiscal year which ended in June of 22. A year ago, we revenue exceeded budget by $4.5 million. So almost $11 million of the surplus is a result of what's happened with COVID. All of a sudden, more people came. And why did that make a difference? Well, the town does not collect any property taxes from anybody on the island. None, zero. So things like beach services, the sheriff, all the wonderful things, picking up your garbage, comes from several sources. Business licenses. Who's the biggest contributor to the business license? The hotel. That's why we have guests. Accommodation taxes, huge source of revenue for us. Building permits. Our financial officer, who happens to be here in the room, has looked at the town over the next decade, and we do this every year. We go 10 years out and see what happens. Guess what happens starting in 2 or 3 years from now? We're going to start running at a break-even level at best. So what we have is a one-time surplus. Be careful how we spend it, because pretty quickly we're going to be out of money. And when that happens, I hate to say it, we're not going to be able to raise accommodation taxes anymore. The building permits are going to go down, and development fees and stuff will stop. So we do have a surplus, but don't look at it as something that's going to go on forever, because it's not. So be careful. Thanks.
Dan. Maura?
So I have a short-term answer and then a slightly longer-term answer. I do believe, and I mentioned this earlier, that the way the money is currently invested, that entire amount plus the restricted funds are invested in something called the South Carolina Investment Pool. And it's got about almost 1,000 municipalities and governmental agencies that pool their funds and invest. And as I said, they've only gotten, at the end of the fiscal year, they had about $60,000 in interest on everything that was invested. So in the short term, I think that changing, and I'm not saying any risk, I'm saying put it in T-bills, put it somewhere else that's permitted under the investment policy of the town. But in the short term, I think there's more return to be gained. And it's a lot of money. And I think we can do better with it. And I think that's, as stewards of money, I think that's one of the obligations, if not one of the primary obligations of the town. I agree that some money should be saved for the Cat 5 hurricane contingency. If that bridge goes out, we're all in trouble. That's just the way it goes. And it will not go up, immediately thereafter. There will have to be probably some interim solution, and how long will that take to build? So does it have to be 20 million? No, it doesn't. I'm also well aware of what Dan said, which is that this may be a one-time, it's going to start trailing off and we're going to go to break even. I still think there's money that we can take advantage of, especially if we get better investment returns. There's an initiative that the town, the partners, the resort, and Keek are involved in called Going Green. And it's consistent with concerns about the environment, and it seems to have died. It seems, maybe when Lucas Hernandez left, I don't know, who was our resiliency specialist at Kika, but I think we need to reinvigorate, look at alternatives to decrease our carbon footprint. That was looking at using electric blowers and landscaping equipment, but I think that there is money that we can invest which invests in our future. And that's one of the things I think we need that money for. I also think we need to look at the traffic issues, and I think there's money to be spent on improving that. And remember, while the town is looking at the traffic right before the gate, Kika is looking at the traffic right behind the gate. They're looking at the Kiowa Beach Drive intersection. So we need to work with them as well on that.
Thank you, Maura. John?
I would like to start out by complimenting the town. I've been involved as a part of this audit committee with the town financial staff, and they actually do a very good job. The town has gotten what's called a clean opinion, which is a nice way of saying there are no problems with its books, and it's gotten no yellow book comments. Now, the yellow book is a frightening audit concept where they tell you all the things that are wrong. They've also won a number of awards, so they're doing very well with their bookkeeping. The way this surplus has been explained to me is primarily we're self-insuring. We're self-insuring against hurricanes. We're self-insuring against a boat hitting the bridge and taking it out. We're self-insuring against our water system all of a sudden having a problem. There are other ways that are much more efficient for a town this size, I believe, rather than trying to self-insure. Mostly you can buy insurance for almost anything, and it's much, much cheaper, I believe, to do it that way. As far as, I don't think public sector organizations ought to be banks. I think we ought to collect what we need and we ought to spend it. If we don't need it, we shouldn't collect it. If we do need it, we should spend it. I think we probably need this money, and we should probably sit down with Kika and figure out between the town and Kika, how can we best allocate the money that's come from us? How do we go about doing this? There are all kinds of ways that you can do this. You can do it through grants. You can do it through contracts. You can do it through changing responsibilities around. I mean, this, I think, is a topic that needs a full and serious discussion about how do we collect our money and how do we spend it and how do we get the public services that a place such as ours deserves. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Brad?
They note at the outset that by all accounts, the town's finances are very well managed, and kudos to the full-time staff for that. It's also, I think, a reflection a little bit of, again, the uniqueness of this particular municipality that doesn't perform all the municipal functions that most towns do. Many of them are borne by Kika. Town also has limited control or less control over the levers of revenue sources, as Dan noted, and a lot of those revenue sources, like the accommodations tax, have to be spent back on tourism-related activities. A significant percentage of it does. But nonetheless, we are where we are. We do need to have some rainy day fund. I agree with John that we should not completely self-insure. But two things we might want to think about with regard to some of the reserve funds. One, we've got to consider what may need to be done with regard to the road that is owned by the town, which is Kiowa Island Parkway, and whether there needs to be an expansion of the roundabout. A turbo roundabout has been what's proposed by Kimley Horn, and then what happens at the Andell West intersection. My own personal view is I would strongly object to traffic signalization there, but whether there may also need to be some build out or roundabout, and that would require funds. The other thing that one might think about is, you may recall when the putt-putt was proposed next to the town's, the municipal center, the town council authorized the mayor to negotiate to purchase that land. That wasn't successful, but the putt-putt hasn't happened. But one of the things we might think about is using some of those reserve funds to negotiate for purchase of properties that are contingent to the town, not for the purpose of residential or commercial development, but to actually preclude that, to put it into conservation easement.
Thank you all for your answers to these questions. Did I skip it again?
Yeah, it's because I'm right in front of you.
I'm glad I don't need a heart operation.
Is that a question tonight?
No, I don't.
So, I support the Green Initiative. I think that was a great program. I hope that someone with this election picks that up and starts that all over again. I think, I support sort of a more proactive approach and not just holding this money for that next storm, but actually trying to partner with the other stakeholders to even sort of generate a larger sum of monies so that we can proactively prepare for that next storm and not just wait for it to happen. For example, since we are dependent on one street, one bridge, is there a way that we don't have to be dependent on that? Is there another alternative that we could think of, or that an engineer could think of, so that we wouldn't be stranded here if there was such a storm? Same thing with our water and electricity. I mean, again, Sanibel is a great example. All those properties, even the ones that weren't damaged or destroyed, they've had no water, no electricity for some time now. And we all know that in this type of climate that these structures, with the humidity and the mold, they're not going to survive that. So I would propose that we, hire outside engineers to really look at this and say, how can we best, we know it's going to happen at some point. It might be many years from now, it might be a short time from now, but how can we best prepare this island for that next big storm? And again, not just keeping the money in a bank, but actually using the money and partnering with the resort, because they're obviously going to be impacted. As Dan said, a big part of this revenue comes from these accommodation taxes. That storm comes, that resort's going to be shut 6 months, maybe longer, and all that revenue is going to dry up. So it's in their interests as well that we prepare for that storm. So I think a lot of great thoughts this evening, but that would be my thought when it comes to these funds.
Okay, well, since I forgot you twice, I'm going to let you start with your closing remark, and then we'll go to Brad, and then sweep down so that everybody gets a chance to
Sure.
make their final. And remember, we're running a little late, so if you could be as brief as possible, but I know you're running for office, so those are the realities.
Well, first of all, I think, as was already mentioned, I think there's obviously a number of very good candidates, a lot of great ideas. There's a lot of work to be done, and I look forward to the task. I hope I'm elected. I'd be honored to be elected, and I look forward to working hard for this town of Kiowa. As I said, I think we all love Kiowa. We all want to preserve Kiowa. I think that's really everybody's goal. And I don't think, we've heard lots of different good ideas on how to do that. But I think the most important thing comes from those thoughts of collaboration. We can't do that by ourselves. We have to collaborate with the other stakeholders. We have to have a good relationship with Kika. We have to have a good or great relationship with the resort, and we have to maintain a good relationship with the partners until that development agreement ends and their time here ends. So I think, again, communication, transparency, and collaboration are really the three goals going forward. As I said, communication, sometimes it's tough. I mean, we don't have a large number of people here even this evening, but it's obviously very, very important that we try to involve the community, the residents, as much as we possibly can, so that we can get a good idea of everyone's opinions and not just a small portion on Kiowa, but we want everyone's opinions. We want everybody's input. And we want, again, to work together so that we can preserve this beautiful place. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Brad?
I will pick up on that theme as well. It's all about working together and collaboration, because no one individual, no one group can solve the challenges facing all of us. If the community deems to elect me, I will be just one of 5 members on the council. We do need to work collaboratively, not just on the council, but work together with Kiowa partners, with the resort, but with external stakeholders as well. What I can commit to doing is engaging. I will commit to you that I will reach out to all the other stakeholders, and that includes not just the governing institutions, but our fellow citizens and community members in Seabrook, Charleston County Planning Commission, Charleston County Council, the Coastal Conservation League, the Kiowa Conservancy, the Low Kent Country Land Trust, everybody that has a stakeholder interest in our community. And what I will commit to you is that I will work hard, I will diligence, I will ask the tough questions, I will look to engage the community on a regular basis at town council meetings. I would welcome and invite citizen comments. I would love to engage them in conversation, not say, gee, you've had your 2 cents, sit down, and then we're going to move on with our business. I will be available. You will have my email address. I will respond to emails that come from the community, because it's critically important that we hear from one another. We have a conversation. We all have a stake in this together.
Thank you, Brad. Dan?
Thank you. First of all, thank you all for coming out tonight and for listening. Those of you who are listening elsewhere, we appreciate that. This job that we're all fighting for here is hard work. Let me tell you that. It's not easy sometimes. It can be very difficult. Brad is right. You're not going to get anywhere unless you work together and you learn to communicate. We do reach out. One of my jobs as Mayor Pro Tem is to be Chair of Ways and Means. I'm also the Chair of the State ATAX Committee. I am the town's liaison to the Dorchester, Berkeley, Charleston Council of Governments, and I'm the representative of the Area Transportation Study. We try to work very hard with our other partners out there, and it's good, but it takes a lot of time. During the bout we had with COVID, it was kind of good because we had Zoom meetings all the time. Now you're in North Charleston every other day, and that's not as much fun, let me tell you. Last thing I want to leave you with is the town does have an emergency contract to build a bridge over. It won't be overnight. It'll probably take 30 days to get the bridge built again, but it's a structural bridge because the tide goes up and down so much, you can't use a floating bridge to get back out. If our bridge goes out, we've got a contract to get a bridge in fast. It's going to cost us $1.5 million to have that bridge for 6 months. By then, we'll fix the bridge, but we'll be in good shape. You'll be able to get on and off the island. Thanks.
Encouraging. John?
I think you all have a number of wonderful choices that you're going to have to choose from. Our qualifications are quite different, and you're going to have to see which qualifications you prefer to vote for. I would prefer that you selected mine, but then each to their own. The thing that we have not talked about as much as I would like to is this whole question of tourism. I think as we go forward, I think this becomes a major issue for us. How we handle it, do we want to limit it? Can we limit it if we want to? If you've tried to get around here on the 4th of July, I couldn't even buy a pizza last 4th of July. I made a mistake. I didn't have supper. And my wife decided that we should not, you can't get a reservation anywhere. I couldn't even go get a pizza. I mean, it was very discouraging. I really think that we do need this, the town needs to set up an office of tourism, and we need to look at the benefits and cost of going forward. I think that just didn't get much attention tonight, and I think it deserves more attention than it's got. I would appreciate your vote, and lots of luck to all of you.
Thanks so much, John. Russell?
Thank you, sir. So a couple of underlying themes we've heard today and that I've observed and listened to the people in the community. One is the communication problem, perceived or true. But if you go back to what I said on my introduction, I said, the business protocol that I employed was no surprises for the client, which allowed me to expand nationwide. That is a recipe to success for this island as well. As Brad was indicating, the no surprises for the client allows for an open door policy. For my business, I was available 24/7. I may be available 12/7 here, but not 24/7. But the point is, I'm not going to hide in my house. I'm not going to be showing up to work on town council things just one day a week on Tuesdays when there's the meeting. I'm going to be working hard and diligently to work towards resolving these issues. The issues, though, for resolving, as I see it from my experience, remember, I was with respect to resolving disputes, has to do with negotiating skills. The whole negotiating skill, or the key, is relationship building. We do have great relationships now with the developer. In order to move forward from wherever the issue is that's bothering the town, we need to use and rely on those positive relationships and move forward. But it also requires a strong backbone, which I also have achieved from the negotiations that I've encountered through my 20 years with my organization, as well as being cross-examined by very smart, very talented attorneys. Those two things, I think, are very important in driving deals, in driving settlements for where this island needs to go into the future. And not to overlook one last thing. We talked about all these big ticket items, all these hot button items here. But running the town is much more than dealing with the Cape, dealing with the spit. It's also dealing with everyday issues such as executing purchase orders, executing subcontracts, getting a contract in place for the bridge. There's all these behind the scenes things that have to get done, which is what I have done in running my business, including human resources. There's a lot that has to be done to run a town, and I've already done it in running my business. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell, so much. I'm skipping over you, Doctor, but not because I forgot you.
I already-
Michael?
Yes,
Go again.
thank you. Well, first of all, really want to thank you for being here. This is being here live and electronically. I think it has been incredibly encouraging for me over the last couple of weeks to meet so many people. As I said, those were residents, homeowners, the resort management, KICA board members, town representatives, and also the partners. And in all of these meetings that I had, I felt the same way. There's a deep commitment for this island. There's an incredible appreciation of what all of these different members of our community have achieved. But there's foremost an incredible commitment to work together for the benefit of this island. And I think that's the crucial point. And I think for all of you that will hopefully go to vote on December 6th, you have to understand that we are at this crossroad, at this junction for the town to be hopefully able to work together in a constructive, civil, strategic, and forward-looking way. We cannot afford as a community to be knocked down by how people communicate on IKEA or how people communicate even face-to-face. We have to come back to a way that we are proud of how we are running this town, and that's what I'm committed to. And I think also it is important for you all to see us being approachable. And I know that most likely there are still a lot of questions here in the room and at home watching this meeting because we had only 2 hours and limited time. So I will be available on several Zoom meetings that I have set up starting tomorrow afternoon until December 6th for 2 hours that will offer you the opportunity to talk to me, ask questions, ask my opinions, leave feedback, and provide your concerns and your proposals how to move forward. There's a little website that I have set up so that you can all easily find these Zoom meetings. I'm happy to hand out these little cards if you wish with the very long email website address because it's meetmichaelheidingsfelder.info. So, and my name is very long. I'm sorry for that, but you will find that easy to go on there. You find all the information, but especially you have the opportunity to talk to me because I think that is what should be the difference in the future, that you have representatives that are available for you to talk. Thank you for your vote. I really appreciate this, and I'm looking forward to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Maura?
Thank you. I also would like to thank everyone who's attended and stuck in beyond the time, but also the people online. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank Kika for sponsoring this, and Jerry for being our moderator, and Ellen and Shannon and everyone on the staff who worked on this. In addition, I'd like to thank the resort for making this space available, and the town, of course, for making this opportunity available. There have been a lot of really interesting issues discussed today, and a lot of agreement on the attributes you need to tackle those. And I think collaboration is maybe, the best word to use it. Negotiation we've heard about and working with each other, but collaboration is probably the right word. I was a trial lawyer for more than 3 decades. And so people who meet me often say, you're a little, you're a little direct. So I often tell a story to explain 2 things about me. One, I was in a very male-dominated profession, in a very male-dominated partnership. Actually, the ratio of female to male on this panel is just about what the ratio was in my partnership. I was in court in front of judges, most of whom were male, and I can count on one hand 2 female clients I had in more than 3 decades. I had all male clients for the most part. And when you're my height and when you're representing someone in court, you need to command. You need to have a presence, you need to command the room. So it's not an apology that sometimes I come across a little direct. It's an explanation and a context. But a lot of what I did was not go in court. It was to negotiate before we got to court. It was to negotiate deals so the clients could avoid having to get into litigation. And one of my most favorite stories is I represented a gentleman who was selling a company he'd owned for more than 2 decades. And so he had all of this sweat equity, and he really needed to get out of the arrangement and get it sold. He needed to get what he needed, price-wise and everything else. And he came to me and said, can you help represent me? Fine. We got to a point where it was getting a little slow. Things were getting a little turgid. And he got kind of agitated. And I said, look, Jim, sometimes it's rugby and sometimes it's ballet. And he looked at me and I said, we're in ballet right now. And he looked at me again and said, okay. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, it was Christmas Eve, but 3 weeks later, we got it done, we got it sold, we got him what he needed. Actually, we got him a little more than what he needed in the sale. Right after that, I went down to where the area where all the theaters are. And I bought men's ballet slippers. And I drove to his office in Lancaster, Pennsylvania from Philadelphia. And I gave him this box and he opened it up and he put it immediately on his bookcase. And he has to explain it to this day. When people come in, he has to explain why he has ballet slippers on his bookcase in his office. My point is this. I know when it's rugby and I know when it's ballet. And I can negotiate and I can work collaboratively. And what I'd like is the honor of doing that on all of your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. Larry?
Okay, hi. Last but not least.
Well, you were first, but
Thank you for that. Well, first off, thank you, Jerry, thank you, Shannon, for organizing this. I think the first thing to say is how wonderful it is that you have 8 good candidates to vote for. I don't think this has ever happened before. I would ask you here and those watching us externally, please vote. Back at the 2018 elections, when there was no mayor standing as a candidate, only 200 people voted. If you vote, even if you don't vote for me, I'll feel better, and I think we all will feel better, and I think you'll feel better. You'll feel that you've contributed. So I think that's important. I also think it's important we all need to recognize that we're lucky here. We have many things going for us, and we actually do get on pretty well. We have our little spats, but most of us get on pretty well all of the time. We've got to try and keep it that way and be civil with each other. And I think that's important. As I said before, there are many issues facing the town. A lot of them are commercial issues, and one of my roles with TRW Automotive was actually to get involved with the commercial issues, primarily from a financial viewpoint. But for example, we got hit with a significant antitrust fine in Europe. It was over 500 million. I had to work with our lawyers to actually negotiate, or to negotiate that down, and to provide the data and the ammunition to reduce the scale of that settlement. And it was significantly reduced in the end. So I think I have the commercial skills, I have the finance skills. I think I'm balanced, I'm independent, open-minded, and prepared to work hard for the community. So I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Well, first of all, how about some applause for thank you so much. I also remind all of you that there is a Kika election, so please urge folks to participate in that. And with that, I thank everyone for coming. Thank you, candidates. Thank you, audience. Have a pleasant evening. Drive safely.
Yeah.